The final boat of the 42 vessels in the Gaza humanitarian flotilla has been intercepted by Israel, 42.5 nautical miles from the Gaza coast. And this was the moment Israeli troops boarded the Marinette boat. It was intercepted there by Israeli troops, as you can see. 6 people, including 3 Turkish citizens, a German, an Omani, and an Australian captain, were aboard the vessel. The Marinette, which was intercepted in the early hours of Friday morning, was the first unauthorized humanitarian mission to come closer than 70 nautical miles from Gaza since Israel imposed its illegal blockade in 2009. We think over 450 activists from across the flotilla are currently being held in Israeli custody, though they're not really confirming numbers. And far-right Israeli Minister Ben-Gvir has used the opportunity to make some genocide propaganda.
אלה הטרוריסטים של המשט, אלה הטרוריסטים, די טרוריסט. תסתכל עליהם, תומכי רוצחים, אגב, האוניות שלהם נמצאו קרחנה שלמה. הם לא באו באמת, לא למשט, לא לעזור, אלא הם באו בעד עזה, בעד הטרוריסטים. אלה טרוריסטים. הם תומכי טרור.
מה זה פה?
זה הספינה שלהם. המפכ"ל בדיוק מראה לי את זה יחד עם מפקד מחוז דרום. מחפשים כאן סיוע הומניטרי. יש כאן מטרנה אחד.
מה זה? זה סיוע הומניטרי? אני לא רואה פה שום דבר.
יש כאן מטרנה אחד, לפי מה שהמפכ"ל אומר, ונראה הכל חינגה אחת גדולה. איזה חינגה יש כאן? לא סיוע ולא הומניטרי.
The Israelis do seem to like tying people's hands up and filming them all in a row. We've seen it a number of times throughout the genocidal war against Gaza. It reminds you a little bit of Bukele. Novara's Kieran Andreou and our friend David Adler are understood to both be in Israeli custody. And we have an update as well from the legal organisation supporting detainees. So they're called Adala, the Legal Centre for Arab Minority Rights in Israel. So they say upon their kidnapping from international waters, participants were forced to kneel with their hands zip-tied for at least 5 hours. That's what we were seeing there. They were sitting like that for 5 hours, apparently, after some participants chanted Free Palestine. During the lawyers' visits, Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir arrived in what was clearly intended as an act of humiliation and intimidation. The flotilla participants were filmed and exploited in a degrading display of control. This display of humiliation took place alongside Israeli officials' ongoing smear campaign, which falsely branded flotilla members as terrorists in an effort to discredit their peaceful mission and legitimize repressive tactics used against them. And they say the entire process is unlawful from start to finish. The interception itself violated international law amounting to abduction in international waters. Israel's attempt to justify these actions through enforcement of its blockade cannot stand. The blockade itself is illegal, constitutes collective punishment, and serves as a central tool of the ongoing genocide, including the deliberate use of starvation as a method of warfare. Participants' rights were systematically violated throughout this process. In addition to being detained, access to water, bathroom, and medications were denied. They were denied access to lawyers, which violated their basic rights to due process, fair trial, and legal representation. My understanding was we were expecting Kieran to be deported, so come back to Britain on Sunday or Monday. As of now, we understand 4 Italian politicians on board the flotilla are understood to have already been sent to Italy, presumably under pressure from the Italian government. The Global Summit Flotilla have also released pictures of 2 of the most prominent members of the flotilla. So they said, quote, images of activists Rima Hassan and Greta Thunberg have emerged as they are being deported, both smiling defiantly. Their courage exposes the injustice of a system that deports those bringing aid while protecting those enforcing an illegal siege. You can detain people, but you can't deport the truth. So as they say, you cannot deport the truth. And it also seems you can't deter brave people wanting to break the siege of Gaza. So as we speak, another flotilla is on the way to Gaza. The Conscience ship is carrying dozens of international journalists and medical professionals from 25 countries. Director Riccardo Corradini, a general surgeon from Italy aboard the Conscience, said, quote, as journalists and medical professionals, we carry the responsibility to speak truth and preserve life. This mission is an appeal to our colleagues and the institutions that represent us globally to break their silence, uphold their ethics, and stand on the right side of history. And we will be covering the Conscience as it nears Gaza, just as we have been with the Summit Flotilla over the past week. Curtis, I mean, I think this has been a remarkably, well, it's funny to use the word successful, isn't it, when Gaza is still under siege and there is still a genocide going on and there's still, there's a famine going on. But as sort of activism goes, this seems like it has been a remarkably, let's say, impactful, because I think, successful wouldn't be quite right. It's been a remarkably impactful sort of form of direct action.
Yeah, you're quite right. It's an impactful achievement for what the activists tried to do. I mean, I think it was very clear that getting to the shores of Gaza was the unlikely thing to happen. The point of this exercise, the point of this mission, was to get all eyes on the flotilla. I watched hours and days of the live stream of it. You guys in Novara on Wednesday did an incredible job of. I think you went from 6 p.m. to midnight. So you've done a fantastic job covering this. I think you had 20,000 people tune into your show, thousands across the world watching. And of course, again, I have to mention your colleague, Kieran Andriot, who I think is a hero. And the rest of those who've been on board on this mission are absolutely heroes. We were all watching very closely with McKenna that broke the blockade, by the way, which is why that was hugely impactful. And I guess you could kind of say it was a success because we weren't sure if they were going to be intercepted beforehand. But McKenna, as you know, 8 a.m. that day, they lost communications or we didn't know anything about it after that point, but they broke the blockade. And my view is, and as you've shown on screen there, there's another conscience flotilla happening, the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, more coming. This needs to keep happening. 42 boats went and they broke the blockade. There needs to be 100, 200, 300 maybe, and to keep trying. But it's when you look at the situation of the famine, the ethnic cleansing, and the genocide, it is a horror show, but you do feel encouraged when you see these scenes of the flotilla getting there. So it is hugely impactful. I got to admit, though, I was very worried for all of them, but I was especially worried for Kieran, who's half Palestinian, and given the racism in Israel and obviously the anti-Palestinian racism over there, given what's going on, I was very worried for him, and we still don't have him back just yet. So these people are incredibly brave in what they're doing, and all I can say is my love goes out to all of them.
Yeah, of course, I can only echo that. Let's look at some more developments when it comes to Gaza, because Donald Trump has given Hamas until Sunday to agree to the peace deal drawn up between him and Netanyahu. Of course, that so-called peace deal had no input from Palestinians. On Truth Social, Trump said this: as retribution for the October 7th attack on civilization, more than 25,000 Hamas soldiers have already been killed. We've got no idea. That could just be any male civilian that they've called Hamas. Most of the rest are surrounded and militarily trapped, just waiting for me to give the word go for their lives to be quickly extinguished. As for the rest, we know where and who you are, and you will be hunted down and killed. I am asking that all innocent Palestinians immediately leave this area of potentially great future death for safer parts of Gaza. Fortunately for Hamas, however, they will be given one last chance. Great, powerful, and very rich nations of the Middle East and the surrounding areas beyond, together with the United States of America, have agreed with Israel signing on to peace after 3,000 years in the Middle East. What a ridiculous man. This deal also spares the lives of all remaining Hamas fighters. The details of the document are known to the world, and it's a great one for all. We will have peace in the Middle East, one way or the other. The violence and bloodshed will stop. Release the hostages, all of them, including the bodies of those that are dead now. An agreement must be reached with Hamas by Sunday evening at 6. Every country has signed on. If this last chance agreement is not reached, all hell, like no one has ever seen before, will break out against Hamas. Now, you can see how this has gone, very well for Netanyahu, really, because he's gone to Washington. He's agreed with Donald Trump a peace deal which suits him, and which the Palestinians have had nothing to do with agreeing at all. And then Donald Trump, who is sort of the most powerful person when it comes to what happens in that region, has said, okay, yep, I back your deal. This is reasonable. Either they sign it or I give you permission to do whatever you want, which is essentially what he's saying. So they get to call it a peace deal when actually it's just, he's just imposing Israel's desires on them and saying, if you don't sign up to this thing that you've had no input into whatsoever, I'm going to let the Israelis do whatever they want. Which, as we know, it sounds like it's going to be the total destruction of Gaza City if it can be destroyed anymore. Very concerning. I think it's very, disgraceful as well, the way our government has just sort of said this is a great peace deal. Our government's position seems to be like, yeah, this is a brilliant peace deal. Everyone should sign on to it. When the process of this was Netanyahu asked Donald Trump to say this is a good idea and force the Palestinians to sign it on threat of death, essentially. As to what Hamas are thinking, this is from The Guardian. They say Hamas leaders are divided between Istanbul, Doha, and Gaza, which complicates discussions on the group's response. Of course, whenever they meet, they're inclined to get bombed, whatever country they're in. Turkey and Qatar are putting pressure on Hamas to make concessions. One sticking point is the plan's demand that Hamas disarm, a source close to the organization said. The surrender of all weapons would be very difficult for Hamas to accept, especially without any political process or substantial progress towards a two-state solution. And then this is a quote from Hugh Lovett, who's a senior fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. He says, there are different trends within the movement. The membership in Doha tends to be more pragmatic, especially compared to the military leadership in Gaza. There is an obvious need to have the buy-in of the military and the rank and file fighters. So again, it's this situation where they've basically said to Hamas, you need to disarm. There isn't any real timeline as to how Gaza would ever become a functioning, viable state. I mean, on one level, I hope they agree to it because I don't want to see what happens next if they don't. But the way that sort of our government and, people who are supposedly sensible are pretending this is some kind of just outcome, I think is fairly ridiculous. Curtis, do you want to comment on this before we move on to our next story?
Yeah, so I think it was Hugh Lovett from the European Council who said Hamas aren't going to agree to this because they're not. I mean, there's very little detail in this deal. It's basically saying, this is manufacturing consent, by the way. This isn't a real deal. It's basically saying, we want everything we want from Hamas or we're going to flatten Gaza. Now, here's the big issue here. I mean, there's sort of two completely opposing sides, right? You've got the Palestinians who want the right to self-determination. And then you want Israel, who have been obvious about their goal, which is to completely wipe the face of the earth for Palestinians and take over control of Palestine. They want greater Israel. So they have no incentive for a deal. I mean, Netanyahu doesn't want a ceasefire because the longer the war goes on, the more he stays in power. If we look back in history, the amount of ceasefire deals that were broken by Israel. So this is a deal that's not meant to be agreed upon. I'm kind of getting deal fatigue, if I'm honest, because we always hear about these deals and then obviously it breaks apart. I mean, just before Trump was inaugurated, he's supposedly had a deal with Israel and nothing came about of it. It's not going to happen, especially when there's been talks of Tony Blair, right? Tony Blair, the guy who's an expert in the Middle East, is going to be involved in controlling Gaza for 5 years. And whatever this transfer of power is going to happen, which I doubt it. I mean, within that initial TB idea, the Tony Blair Institute, right? They said they wanted a completely destroyed Hamas or unarmed Hamas, but also a diminished role with the Palestinian Authority. So basically, the entire strategy here is to remove any kind of sovereignty, any kind of power from Palestinians. And in a way, this just feels like they're trying to manufacture consent by saying, look, if they don't agree to this deal, we're going to do whatever we want, which is kind of strange because they've never tried to manufacture consent before. I mean, they've just done what they want to, Israel, that is. I mean, we've literally seen videos of IDF filming themselves committing war crimes. They clearly haven't been that interested in making themselves look good. So it's not a deal that we should be really, look, we should keep up with the developments, right? But I don't think this is ever going to pass. I mean, at the end of the day, if there is basically an immovable object between the two sides, that's what it is, right? There's never going to be an agreement because Palestine wants to survive, Palestinians want to have their own state and sovereignty, and Hamas wants to see the end to them, then how can there possibly be a deal? This is just basically Israel getting whatever they want through different means. And I just think they're trying to make it look like they're doing the right thing when they absolutely are not. Again, Tony Blair isn't involved with this, and nothing good can come from Tony Blair's involvement. So to me, it feels like a bogus deal. I do share your sentiments, though, that you kind of want Hamas to agree to this because I'm extremely fearful of what Israel would do afterwards. But it kind of feels like they're just going to continue what they're already doing now. I mean, they're already committing famine, ethnic cleansing, and of course, genocide. They're telling people now in southern Gaza, you need to leave. And if you don't leave, we're going to treat you like all terrorists, which is basically what it has been. We've had Israeli politicians call every single person in Palestine terrorists. 50% of Gazans are children. So they clearly don't care. So I don't feel I feel pretty skeptical what the supposed deal really is.